unmuted.
All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Well, first and foremost, welcome everyone to QTS QuikInform Webinar Wednesday. Today our topic is Windows 10. So the title of our webinar today is Start Your Move to Windows 10, Learn Successful Best Practices for a Wildly Successful Deployment. I'm here with my CEO, founder, and president, Danielle Rosenberg.
Hello, everyone.
And I guess we will get started. So can move on to the next slide. Okay, so everyone is currently in mute mode because we're going to be recording. We ask that you hold all your questions to the end, to the Q&A section, which is after our calls to action. If you're experiencing any issues, here are the dial-in numbers below, as well as the access code and the webinar ID. We'll move on. Okay, so a little bit about QTS. We are a Microsoft Gold partner for data center, data platform, mid-market solutions, and additional silver competencies. We're based out of Parsippany, New Jersey. Been around for about 24 years, so we're coming up on the big 2-5. We have numerous awards for Cloud Partner of the Year, Metro Partner of the Year, and we follow very strictly to our Microsoft partnerships as well as their methodologies. So we've been locally managed for the last 15 years. I think some of our attendees today are familiar with us, but those that aren't, we're glad to have you. So we can move on. And I think I'm going to turn it over to our CEO, Danielle Rosenberg. Neil, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you, Alex, and looking forward to a very detail-filled presentation today. We're actually condensing what we've previously delivered as a 3-hour in-person seminar into a 1-hour webinar. Obviously, we've trimmed the content back, but there's just so much good content I couldn't cut a lot of it out. So we are going to move fairly quickly to try to give you as much information as possible. And again, if we can hold questions to the end, then we'll open it up and stay on as long as we have to make sure everyone is informed and able to make a good decision here. So, Windows 10 for the enterprise. This technology was developed with 4 core principles, or what Microsoft often refers to as pillars. When they're developing a new product or an upgrade to a product, they'll kind of define the main areas that they want to focus on and then wrap the features and the efforts around that. So the 4 pillars behind Windows 10 was number 1, achieve more. And that ties in with Microsoft's revised mission statement of helping people and organizations to achieve more as their vision as an organization. So this is how Windows 10 wraps under that as the operating system people use for the Microsoft platform. Number 2, devices, or specifically innovative devices for making things happen. We're going to talk very specifically about each of these. Protection against modern security threats, this is a big one, and managed for continuous innovation. So each of these will be a section of the presentation, as well as drilling down into new features and some of the licensing considerations and deployment considerations. So from the standpoint of achieving more, again from a personal or an organizational productivity perspective, some of the key principles behind Windows 10 were, first, to make it easy for Windows 7 users to migrate. This is a lessons learned sort of thing as it relates to Windows 8. So Windows 7, very broadly adopted operating system. Most of you are probably running Windows 7 in your organizations today. Windows 8 came out a few years ago, and it's not that it was a bad operating system, but deployment of Windows 8 was very limited because Windows 8 was a big jump in a whole new direction. Microsoft was shifting their business to be more competitive with Apple and to win the battle for touch devices, basically competing with the iPad. And Windows 8 was really designed first and foremost from a mobile device perspective, which is great if you have a touch-sensitive tablet, but not so great if you're trying to use a desktop computer. So Windows 10 really kind of brings back to a balancing point, and I think gives you the best of both worlds. It's a familiar platform for people that are used to Windows 7, and it's very mouse and keyboard friendly, but it also is a very flexible and capable platform for mobile devices. So it's not as far a stretch for Windows 7 users as Windows 8 was, and that's why I say kind of a lessons learned thing for Microsoft. Number two, familiar user experience scaled across devices. We'll talk about that more in the next slides. And lastly, but probably most importantly, increasing user productivity. And part of that is just core functionalities of the operating system. Windows 10 will boot up faster, shut down faster, have better networking and wireless capabilities. Things that affect user experience in using a computer are very much better on the same hardware, just upgrading the operating system. Now, as far as the user experience goes, one of the key things here is the concept of universal applications. And this is really Microsoft's answer to Apple and to Google, Samsung, etc., in terms of winning back mind share in the mobility marketplace. Because Windows Phone has had a relatively small slice of market share, not nearly the adoption that these other products has, and that's largely because the apps never got built on the Windows Phone platform nearly as much as they did on Apple and Google, because those vendors were in market first and won over the hearts and souls and minds and dollars of developers, which is kind of ironic because that's exactly what Microsoft did with Windows when they first won the desktop operating system battles in the really, I guess, more the 90s. And so Microsoft stepped back, realized that they needed to change the rules of the game to be able to win in mobility, and I think have a very sound strategy here. The idea is that if you write an application for Windows 10 following the design guidance and best practices from Microsoft, that application will run on your desktop computer, on your tablet or laptop, on your Windows Phone, or on any other device that's running the Windows 10 operating system. More on that in a bit. And so the idea is to give developers broad reach from their platform, that if they write their app for Windows Phone, it scales up to tablets and PCs. If they write it for PCs, it can also work as a mobile version on phones. And so I think it's a very clever play on the part of Microsoft to win back that market. And we're already seeing a significant growth in the App Store for Windows 10 in that regard. Now, when we talk about devices, there's a very broad range of devices running Windows 10. So I'm going to start with the lower right-hand corner. That's an Xbox with Kinect. Many of you may not be aware, but when Xbox One launched a couple years ago, it actually was running under the covers Windows 8. And so there's been a background upgrade process that's been slipstreaming through these devices to bring them up to Windows 10. And that's important from a code compatibility perspective. You may have also read in some of the gaming publications, if any of you are gamers, about how Microsoft is focusing on making compatibility for Xbox games on Windows 10 on the PC. So again, it goes to that universal converged platform experience that Microsoft's trying to build to give developers more leverage for their investment in software. And Xbox has always been part of the Windows product group in Microsoft's reporting structure and hierarchy as a modern interface for Windows. And ultimately, the tiles that we're used to from Windows 8 and Windows Phone, that interface actually started on Xbox, or at least Xbox 360 is as far back as I go. Then you have the traditional PC, the traditional notebook, the tablet, the phablet, the phone, tablet, converged, bigger than a phone, smaller than a tablet type device, different, large and smaller phones, circuit board. What's a circuit board doing there? We'll come back to that in a moment. And then above it at the top, what looks like a TV, but is really SurfaceHub. and what looks like a expensive and interesting set of eyewear, that's Hololens. We're going to talk about both of those on separate slides, but the idea here is that all of these things will run the Windows 10 operating system. So what's important here is that applications written for Windows 10 can run with sensitivity to what they're running on any of these devices. Applications written for Windows 10 create leverage because you can take advantage of the different factors, and devices running Windows 10 on any of these form factors can be managed by System Center or Intune and secured by group policy. So this is really a great enterprise play in terms of recognizing that there are a lot of different device types that meet different business needs. And in fact, I would argue over the next 5 years, you're going to see even more change and more, let's say, strange-looking things on this slide than we have today. So the idea behind universal apps is being driven by Microsoft first and foremost with Office. The idea of Office for, modern Office being able to essentially be the same code running on Windows phones, tablets, and desktops, and the universal apps being able to do this, but also integrate. So for example, OneNote, which is in my opinion one of the gems in the Microsoft world, hidden gems that a lot of people don't know about and take advantage of, OneNote integrates with the Edge browser and with Cortana. And so you've got the ability to take advantage of new operating system features. Internet Explorer is still there. It may have been hidden, and the Edge icon will be the first thing you see, but Internet Explorer is still there for backward compatibility because Internet Explorer supports plugins and is more compatible with traditional business applications. And so you still have Internet Explorer in the box. It's not default on the menu bar, but it is in the box and still available to you. And that specifically is Internet Explorer 11. It has been enhanced in terms of security, and one of the ways you can start to transition users to get them ready for Windows 10 is to deploy IE 11 down to your existing Windows 7 and 8 machines. This is also important because I'm going to call out in a slide a little bit down the road, the end is near for earlier versions of Internet Explorer. So more on that to follow. I got to keep you online with something here, so we're going to have a few gems later in the presentation. Microsoft Edge, and this is a little confusing because the logo is also an E, kind of like IE. Microsoft Edge, which used to be called Project Spartan when it was first announced, is the modern browser. And I would almost say the consumer browser, but it's designed for consumption, designed for tablets, designed for voice integration, so you can navigate with the Cortana voice interface in Windows 10. And it's a very distraction and clutter-free interface for consuming web pages and web content. So if you've not used it, you should definitely get familiar with it. And obviously this is where Microsoft is going while maintaining Internet Explorer compatibility for older applications. The next major category is innovative devices for making things happen, and this is really exciting. One of the important messages here is for your existing devices, Windows 10 will work really well. We've seen Windows 10 installed over the top or re-imaged on lots of hardware running Windows 7, Windows 8, and it actually runs better on that hardware. So it's been a very strong platform in terms of being able to reuse existing hardware. On the flip side, there's a lot of new device types, and those new device types that Windows 10 supports can be your traditional consumer and commercial devices, but also industry-specific devices like ruggedized devices for field service, or even kiosks and industry-built solutions where you don't even realize that it's Windows running in the background. But the advantage of being Windows running in the background is all the things I said before. Universal apps, you can manage it with System Center, you can secure it with group policy. So these things all create value for organizations, especially businesses that are concerned about security of the platform. not to understate the importance of centralized management. They're both important. From an innovation perspective, Windows 10 supports pen, it supports touch, it supports multiple form factors, and you're seeing a lot of creativity in devices. And I think this was fueled by Microsoft coming into the hardware market with the Surface tablet and really hitting a home run. And we're seeing a lot of adoption of Surface 3 and Surface 4 in the market right now, especially by executives and mobile professionals. My personal opinion, I don't think Microsoft entered the market to take away market share from HP, Dell, Lenovo, Acer, all the others. I think Microsoft entered the market to tweak them a bit and pull them along from the standpoint of innovation, because a few years ago when Windows 8 came out, there really wasn't a lot of hardware innovation around Windows, and a large part of that was because of the cost of Windows versus being able to use the Android operating system for free. So Microsoft really did two things to combat that. Number one, they eliminated the royalties on Windows for devices, I believe, less than 7.9 inches on the screen, and that made Windows a much more compelling platform for phones and phablets and small tablets. But Microsoft also launched Surface, and the idea of Surface was to give people an entirely new experience running Windows. And they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. You know, you now have vendors like HP that have come out with, you could call them Surface clones, that essentially followed Microsoft's direction. And now you are seeing more innovation from others, even as Microsoft comes out with new and innovative devices like the Surface Book. Unfortunately, this is a webinar, not a seminar, because at our seminars we'll have a Windows device bar set up. We'll have that at our annual conference on September 13th as well. And the device bar is a great way to see all the different types of devices that Microsoft and its partners like Dell and HP and others have brought to market. This is a very important point. We even added this slide after we started using this deck last fall, and that is about Skylake. If you're not familiar, Intel has come out with the next generation processor called Skylake that's now starting to hit the market. And I have 2018 underlined because this date used to be July 17th, 2017, and there was a customer backlash about it. So Microsoft pushed back a year, and you can see more about this on the blog and notes on the page on this URL. But essentially, if you think about Windows 7, Windows 7 came to market in 2009. I'm not a math major, but if I look at the current year 2016 and I subtract 2009, that tells me Windows 7 is a 7-year-old operating system. That puts it squarely in the middle of the extended support lifecycle phase for Microsoft technologies. So what Microsoft does as a policy, with some exceptions, but by and large this is their rhythm, is when a product launches for the first 5 years, it's in what's called mainstream support. And mainstream support means not only do you have security updates and technical support, but you'll have things like feature packs, new capabilities, and you'll have the product refined to take advantage of new types of hardware. But once you get past the 5-year mark and you're in extended support, the product will only get security updates and technical support. Microsoft is under, based on its lifecycle guidelines, no obligation to add new features and no obligation to add compatibility with new hardware. So now here we have the Skylake processor with new capabilities coming out on a wide range of different vendors' PCs, and Microsoft made the statement of, after July 2017, we're not going to support Windows 7 and 8.1 on Skylake because it's new hardware and these operating systems will be in the extended support lifecycle phase. Now, for most organizations we deal with, primarily mid-market, hundreds to thousands of computers, you can get a deployment like this done, moving an entire organization to Windows 10 if you do it right, in a matter of months. Typically, 4 to 6 months, maybe longer, maybe a year, but it's not normally going to take multiple years to do that if you're focused, if you apply a good methodology, we'll talk about that at the end, etc. But larger enterprises, they looked at this and it was very upsetting that Microsoft was saying they wouldn't be able to run Windows 7 on new hardware. And Microsoft conceded on this and extended the life cycle 1 year. But I think this is a warning sign of things to come, and so for those of you that are on Windows 7, I think you're going to need to start thinking about Windows 10 from the standpoint of this support lifecycle and what that's going to mean, as well as from the standpoint of the benefits that Windows 10 will bring. So now we have a wide range of different business devices, and I'm going to skip on talking about SurfaceHub and Hololens for a moment because I have separate slides on them. But there we have that pesky circuit board again. Why are we talking about that in the context of Windows? Well, that's because Windows 10 is the operating system for the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is essentially the fact that we have all sorts of different types of hardware devices, sensors and robotic devices and all sorts of equipment that is running some type of operating system. Maybe it's part of an assembly line, maybe it's a kiosk, maybe it's part of a consumer-facing system. And one example, it could be a circuit board that's installed into a washing machine, running Windows, secured by group policy, managed by System Center. And this example, I just love this example because you don't typically think of laundromats as being a particularly high-tech operation, but laundromats have equipment that's valuable that fails. So if we can collect information on service history and reliability and bring that data from the machines up into a big data repository like Azure, we can then draw conclusions and we can plan maintenance and we can decide whether to buy Model A or Model B. I think this goes to an overall conclusion that our role, those of us who are IT leaders in our organizations, our role is fundamentally changing, and the way we think of computers over the next 5 years will be fundamentally changing. And we have to get ahead of that if we're going to truly add value to our businesses and the organizations we work in and for. So the idea here is to have one Windows 10 for all your devices, including non-traditional form factors, to be able to apply very granular control both to the security of the device and the user experience, and to be able to bring data back to the cloud, specifically Azure, from those devices and manage them and optimize the value we get from those investments. And as we talk about different devices, that can really range across a wide range of types of systems. It could be 3D printers, it could be terminals, it could be digital signage. If any of you go to the Microsoft offices, you'll notice a lot of digital signage. Guess what operating system is running behind those signs? And so again, our vision of the traditional computer is very much changing around us, and we have to react and hopefully proact around those changes. From a device security perspective, think about what I said before. Windows 10 is the 2015 operating system with new revs coming out. Windows 7 is the 2009 operating system, so you have a security footprint on Windows 7 that's 7 years old. Windows 10 is going to take better advantage of new hardware. Windows 10 is going to integrate with modern software better, and it's just going to have more advanced security features and capabilities compared to a 7-year-old operating system. I think we get tricked or lulled into a false sense of security around Windows because we're comfortable with Windows 7, but Windows 7 is actually pretty old, and we do have to think about this end of life upcoming. And you know, Microsoft is pushing for Windows 10 because it also is responsible for security of its platforms, you know, especially in the customer's minds. And from that perspective, they can simply provide a better, more secure experience to its customers on Windows 10 than they can on 7. Now, I said I was going to come back to SurfaceHub. So a number of years ago, Microsoft bought a company called Performance Pixel Incorporated, or PPI. And PPI basically was a manufacturer of very high quality, very large displays. Microsoft did not get into this business to sell television screens. What they did was they bought the technology to be able to mass produce it and drive down cost and create a collaboration station. And that's SurfaceHub. SurfaceHub is essentially a combination of a computer and monitor that you put into a common area, a conference room, and essentially it's a video conferencing station, it's a collaboration whiteboard, but it integrates with the rest of your computer network based on Windows and Active Directory identity and runs technologies like OneNote and Skype that allow people to work together in new ways from a collaboration perspective. They have these at the Microsoft stores as well, and please let us know if you have interest here and we can schedule follow-up and set up a demo if you're interested. The other thing that I think is really cool, and this goes to fundamentally changing the way we think of computers, is HoloLens. And HoloLens is not commercially available now except for developers. So Microsoft is essentially allowing developers to buy a test unit that they can work with to create software based on HoloLens. This isn't, trying to think of the wording I wanted to use. This is augmented reality, not virtual reality. Virtual reality is I put on the goggles and all I see is the things the goggles give me. Augmented reality is I put on goggles and I see the world around me, but I also see what's being projected, whether it's a computer screen, whether it's information about objects. I mean, I don't need to walk past my refrigerator and have the HoloLens tell me it's a refrigerator, but maybe I do want to have the HoloLens tell me the temperature that the inside of the refrigerator is operating at. And then also things that can be projected by software. So in this case, and we saw a demo of this at Microsoft's Worldwide Partner Conference last July, Autodesk has written a version of AutoCAD for HoloLens so that a designer can create a design and essentially project it with HoloLens, and then using the touch interface with HoloLens, you can make changes. If you want to pull the fender out a little bit or change it from green to blue, you can do that by interacting with the HoloLens goggle and the interface for touch and motion. So it's another way of interacting with technology, but it's running Windows underneath. And so we have to think about this is a huge change. It's going to be very transformative, and we need to think about this not defensively of, oh my God, how do I support this as my users get hold of it? We need to think about this as, wow, what can we do in our organization to take advantage of this, to create a better experience, to create competitive advantage and value for our customers. So that's the exciting section. Now we have to go to the, we got to deal with this section, and that's security. And we're in a very different world than we were even a few years ago. In the old world and the way of thinking about security, it was very much about cyber crime and hacking and things of that nature. Now we're dealing with a different level of threat. There's a revolution that's occurred. Now we're dealing with cyber espionage and warfare and terrorism. Not broadly, but we're starting to see it. And it used to be that people were focused on attacking the Fortune 500. It's like the old line when a reporter asked Jesse James, why do you rob banks? And he said, well, that's where all the money is. Well, now you see targets across all verticals through supply chains, subcontractors, and social engineering is still a major threat factor, and small businesses. Well, a lot of small businesses that have been attacked, not because they are who they are, but just because a lot of attacks now are occurring on an automated basis, whether it's defacing a website or whether it's trying to break in and take control of the site. So it doesn't matter who you are anymore. All that matters is you're on the internet, and therefore you're a target. And we're used to thinking of vulnerabilities around malware, but we're now seeing massive scale for credential theft, which is why PCI has stepped up so much for retailers, and just consistent and persistent threats. So as we look at this evolution from mischief to profit to basically disruption and terrorism, even by non-government organizations, we're dealing with a very different landscape that we have to be very sensitive to securing. And so Windows 10 is designed really around securing identity, integrating with Active Directory and Active Directory in the cloud, which in Microsoft's world is called Azure AD, or as a product, Azure AD Premium as part of the Enterprise Mobility Suite, helping customers to secure the data and the device and the connection more effectively. And specifically, because Windows 10 is designed to be both a mobile and a traditional PC operating system, we have the ability to contain and separate user and corporate personas. We have the ability to take advantage of data protection in different ways than we did before. We can lock down which apps can and can't run, whitelisting, on a device. We have take advantage of hardware, things like TPM modules and stuff like that. That's not new, but it's enhanced. So we have a wide range of capabilities around security that we did not have in earlier versions of Windows. And one of the best capabilities you could look at as a security but also productivity is if you have Windows 10 Enterprise and Windows Server, you can put a Windows Server, 2012 server, or soon to be 2016 server on your perimeter and run direct access. And a lot of people I know still aren't familiar with direct access. Microsoft uses it heavily. We use it at QTS. It's essentially a clientless VPN. You boot up your PC, it connects to the network with your Active Directory credentials, and you're on network. Even if you're not on network, even if you're at home or at a Starbucks, and you have access to the same information. So it's also great for IT because there's less infrastructure to have to maintain than a lot of third-party VPN products. So that's a benefit feature of Windows Enterprise on the client side as well as Windows Server. Now, Microsoft is focused on continuous innovation of the operating system. And Windows 10 may or may not, there's not been a conclusive statement issued here, I think, but it likely will be the last major iteration of the operating system from the standpoint of being a standalone product. What we're going to see is Windows 10 will essentially be the core to which new features and capabilities will be added to Windows on an ongoing basis via internet connectivity. And Microsoft is moving to a much faster rhythm of adding features and capabilities this way. It's kind of like we did a webinar on System Center Config Manager and pointed out that it wasn't called SCCM 2015, it was SCCM 1511 because the version was released in 2015 in November. So 2015, 11th month. And now there's 1602 released in February of this year. You have a fast speed of technology innovation that's built into the operating system. And you have within that a range of management choices. You can use Microsoft Intune, which we're going to touch on briefly, or third-party MDM technologies. Whether you're using Windows as a tablet or a PC or on a phone, the operating system is designed to be a managed mobile operating system. So if you use Intune, that's great. If you use things like AirWatch or Mobile Iron or Mass 360, it'll work with them too as long as they comply with industry standards. Reimagined deployment, this is really critical. So what we've done traditionally with Windows deployment with a lot of customers is engineered out a system where we'll image a machine, we'll essentially script and automate the process of capturing the user state and data that's on a machine, copying it to a protected section of the hard disk or up to a network server, wiping and reloading the hard disk with the new operating system, and then bringing back down that user state and data using typically the Microsoft User State Migration Tool, or USMT. It's a great approach to achieve a lot of leverage for bigger deployments, and it gives you the advantage of giving people a clean instance of the Windows operating system, which is typically more stable and easier to support. But it is a fair amount of work, and some people will say, I like my operating system the way it is. I already imaged the machine when I put Windows 7 on it. I don't want to blow away the existing configurations. So as long as you meet certain baseline requirements with Windows 10, we can actually now do an in-place upgrade. And that's a change with Windows 10. Specifically using SCCM as the deployment methodology, which is our preferred and default way of doing things. And that gives you the ability to typically reduce your deployment costs and validation, because you're preserving a lot of the existing state without moving it off and bringing it back. I recommend this approach when organizations have a consistently imaged machine and in effect have a solid foundation to put the house on. If you're an organization that has disparate machines that aren't consistent, haven't been imaged, then I would typically recommend the re-imaging approach. But essentially you have more options here, which is why it's important to have a really good design and strategy behind what you're doing. And for those of you who have planning services vouchers from Microsoft, if you have an enterprise agreement, that's a really good way we can engage with you to help you build that understanding and build that vision of what's the right way to move to Windows 10. More on that later. App and device compatibility. We've seen a very high level of compatibility around both apps and devices. It's not to be taken for granted, though. You do need to test compatibility, particularly with applications. There are a number of scanning tools. We, as a Citrix partner, have access to something for our customers called App DNA, where we can run a scan of a network and find all the apps and identify which ones are compatible with which versions of Windows, with which versions of Citrix, terminal services, VDI, etc. This is one of the most important things around Windows deployment, is having an understanding of the environments so that you can properly plan it. But there is a high degree of compatibility. You can trust, but you need to verify. From the standpoint of the App Store, Microsoft has invested a lot in getting people to write apps, but they also do have the App Store for Business out there. They're using that to encourage partners to create scalable and reusable work product for multiple customers. As a customer, you can also create your own company store so that you can distribute applications from your own App Store within the Microsoft App Store. So this gives you a sense of some of the areas of focus on Microsoft's part and innovation. I just want to touch briefly on something very directly related to Windows, which a lot of customers aren't aware of, but should be, called the Enterprise Mobility Suite, or EMS. And Satya Nadella referred to this 2 years ago as Microsoft's most significant technology for organizations. And Microsoft has put a huge emphasis on this. EMS actually consists of 4 pieces, because they just added advanced threat analytics, which is a security monitoring technology to it. ATA is essentially technology where if I see, to pick on her, if I see Alex Mason is logged in at QTS in Parsippany, New Jersey, but I see that 10 minutes ago she logged in China, something is wrong here. You can't have 2 people in 2 different places using the same credentials. It's not the same person, and there's probably a security concern there. So ATA helps you pick up on that, and that's part of EMS. But the main parts of it are Azure Active Directory Premium, which essentially extends Active Directory up into the cloud and gives you single sign-on not only with Microsoft cloud applications like Exchange Online, OneDrive, SharePoint Online, the pieces of Office 365, but also with third-party apps like Salesforce, Box or Dropbox, Workday, Concur, a catalog of about 2,700 other applications that have written to Microsoft's APIs so that when you're logged into Active Directory and you log into these applications, you're logged in seamlessly. And what's critically important is it helps you to give employees access, but you can also, in addition to onboarding, you can offboard employees, that if you shut down the Active Directory account, the user will not be able to get into the cloud applications because of that tie back to Active Directory. And that's really important because without having this, larger organizations have a big exposure and have to manually hunt down all the different services that a user might have had access to, which is just an unrealistic task for most organizations. You also have Microsoft Intune, which is Microsoft's mobile device management technology, and that can run standalone or integrated with System Center Config Manager. And you have Microsoft Azure Rights Management Services, which is security on documents and emails. We did another webinar months ago called What is EMS and Why Should I Care? If you're interested in more information on this, visit our YouTube channel. Search for QTS under YouTube, and you'll find that recording as well as many of our other QuikInform webinars there. So let me touch on some of the new features that weren't in the slides earlier. Probably the most important one is bringing back an oldie but goodie, the Start menu. And it doesn't look exactly the same as it did, but it's close enough. It's familiar enough for users that they won't be spooked by it the way they were by Windows 8. So you have a Start button, and it brings out not listings the way Windows 7 does, the traditional Windows Start button, but tiles. But on these tiles, you can resize them, you can control them, and critical for IT, you can manage them through group policy. So this is a great feature in terms of compatibility and user comfort. I'm not going to say you don't need to train users on Windows 10. Part of your planning should be assessing what level of training is appropriate, and that very much depends on your users. But the learning curve is far less steep for people transitioning to 10 than it was for people transitioning to 8. We do have the ability to customize tiles, so users can do it or IT can do it through group policy. So it gives people flexibility and control over their experience unless you want to lock it down. We also have the ability using HyperV technology to have virtual desktops. This is great for developers where maybe you want to have your productivity instance but also dev instances, or maybe a salesperson might want to have their regular workspace but then a VM Windows 10 instance that they are doing demos of their technology from. So this is a very nice feature depending on what your use case might be to be able to run multiple instances of Windows 10 as virtual desktops on the same piece of hardware. We also have Cortana, which is Microsoft's voice interface, and I would argue this is one of the other game changers. The nature of how we interact with computers is fundamentally changing. It's not just Microsoft. You have Siri from Apple. You have the Amazon Echo. Voice interaction with computers of any type is the future. It's actually the present. It's where we are today. And again, going back to Worldwide Conference, Microsoft gave an example of a restaurant where a cook was working on catering orders and realized they didn't have enough broccoli. Instead of going to a computer screen and typing in and finding what's the part number for ordering broccoli from our food service provider, the cook's in a kitchen, dirty hands with a knife, well, hopefully not dirty hands in a kitchen, but you know what I mean. You know, working with food, you know, got a knife, you know, it's hot, and instead of going to a computer and typing in an order, they can just interact with Cortana and say, Cortana, I need 3 cases of broccoli delivered by tomorrow. And the order gets placed, obviously with some integration, you know, and some back-end work being done by IT and the support provider. So there's whole new use cases of technology that will be empowered by voice interaction. Not to be confused with Cortana is Continuum. Continuum is Microsoft's technology for allowing devices running Windows 10 to change the interface based on the mode they're operating in. So for example, if you have a tablet and you detach the keyboard, Windows 10 will go into tablet mode and it's going to favor touch rather than type. As another example, if you have a Windows phone and you're using it as a phone, it's going to be touch interface with a soft keyboard. But if you take that phone and you plug it into a docking station that's connected to a keyboard, a mouse, and a monitor, that Windows phone becomes, drum roll please, your computer. So we now have realized the vision of carrying your computer around in your suit jacket pocket or your pocketbook. And this is part of Moore's law of the hardware getting smaller and faster and more powerful. So Continuum is the Microsoft technology that makes this real. We also have Hello, which is biometric authentication, so it can actually do a retinal scan as well as touch interaction and so on. So it does require some specialized hardware. And I mentioned Internet Explorer 11. This was the thing I was leading up to. As of January of this year, only the most current version of Internet Explorer will be supported. So if you're running Windows 7, you can't run older versions of IE. You need to bring it current or be out of support from Microsoft. So if you follow the link here, support.microsoft.com, Microsoft Internet Explorer, or just do a search on Bing or Google, you will find this information. Now, a couple of licensing considerations. I know this is everyone's favorite topic as it relates to Microsoft technology. So, number one, there are 4 major additions. The newbie to the family is Windows 10 for Education, but we've essentially got a continuation of Windows 10 Home, Windows 10 Pro, and those ship on computers, so you make a choice when you're buying the computer. Is it a home computer that's not going to domain join and attach to a network, or is it a organizational computer that is going to attach to a network? And those are both free upgrades, at least through 1 year from the launch date. And then there's Windows 10 Enterprise, which you get through an enterprise agreement with Microsoft or software assurance being added to Windows 10 Professional. And there's a wide range of additional features on Windows 10 Enterprise that I'll touch on in the next slide, including access to the Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack, or MDOP. So we'll come back to that in another slide. So the major versions are as listed here. And Microsoft has been running a promotion for a free upgrade to Windows 10 from these noted versions, either Windows 10 Home or Windows 10 Pro, and then it will be a paid upgrade after July, I forget the exact date, after July of this year. Many of you probably are already running Windows 10 at home if you're IT professionals, even if you're not running it at work, and many of you are probably running it at work. But it's a very seamless process. My mother is not that technically savvy, but she did it herself on her home computer. So I won't say if she could do it, anyone could do it. And no offense to my mother, love her dearly, but it's not that difficult to process the way Microsoft has structured it. So encourage you to get the word out to friends, family, and others about this upgrade, because I don't know if Microsoft's going to extend the date or not, but it's safest to assume that they will not, and that it will become a paid upgrade at some point, if not in July, at some point thereafter. Now this next slide is what I was referring to when I talked about Windows 10 maybe being the last version of Windows. The idea now is that features and updates will stream down from the internet and actually for consumer devices be managed by Microsoft. Microsoft is being much more assertive about forcing patches down to improve the security posture of devices. So for consumer devices, we have Windows Update. For business users, we have the current approach for patch management, which is pushing down patches and features. And then we have something new called Long-Term Service Branch, or LTSB. The idea behind LTSB is that we can define certain types of systems that we want to minimize change to because of the risk of that change. So for a user PC, we might want to push down new features, and we might want a kind of thick version of Windows because it's going to have a lot of different software packages on it, and we want to make a lot of capabilities available to users. But if you've got a terminal that's sitting there that nobody's touching, that's running your emergency room or your air traffic control system, you probably don't want a lot of updates to that system. That's a challenge because you want that system to have a good security posture and a minimized attack surface, but you don't want that system getting patched frequently because you never know if that latest patch is the one that's going to cause a compatibility issue or break the system. So the idea behind LTSB is that you're going to have regular security updates, but that the security updates for systems that are on LTSB are going to be the minimum needed for the Windows operating system to function. That it's not about features, that it's not about enhancements, it's not about new hardware capabilities, because these type of systems, LTSB type systems, generally run till they die. But it's just about making sure that the attack surface is minimized and that any security holes are closed. And other than that, change as little as possible. So this is, I think, a great innovation and strategy from Microsoft and will make a big difference for IT organizations supporting these types of systems. Now, Windows 10 Enterprise comes with software assurance. So those of you that have enterprise agreements that cover the Windows where it's not a component EA, we have a number of new capabilities that have been added. So in addition to what's been there before, like App Locker, Windows to Go, Direct Access, as I talked about it, we now have Device Guard. We now have granular user experience controls and lockdown. What's also been added is something that was a separate, not terribly expensive, but separate technology called the MDOP, or Microsoft Desktop Optimization Pack. And that includes 5 components, all of which are valuable to different degrees and in different situations. We have Microsoft User Experience Virtualization, or UEV. That's the ability to essentially define profiles and manage user persona on different computer systems. So as you think of it as roaming profiles done right. We also have Microsoft Application Virtualization, or AppV. That's application streaming, the technology Microsoft acquired years ago when they bought SoftGrid and the Softricity product. So you can take an application and instead of installing it in the traditional way where the files all go wherever they go in the Windows file system, it becomes a virtualized, containerized, maybe not containerized exactly, but in concept, bubble is the term Microsoft uses to isolate the application from other applications. There's a law firm in Newark we worked with AppV years ago where they were running Office 2003, and they had very complex integrations in their toolbar for document management and document review and redlining and things like that, document templates, like most law firms. But they were starting to get Office 2007 and 2010 level documents. They weren't ready to upgrade Office, but if they installed newer versions, it would have broken the existing version that they had engineered so precisely. So we helped them putting AppV into the environment so they could run a clean standard version of Office in addition to the engineered law firm version of Office, just so if an attorney got a document they couldn't read in 2003, they could at least open it and edit it. And actually this is the same technology concept, and I think a lot of the same technology plumbing underneath that Microsoft uses when it streams Office 365 Office clients down to the desktop with the click to run installation option. We also have Microsoft BitLocker Administration and Monitoring, or MBAM. This is essentially the ability to centrally control BitLocker encryption keys. So MBAM gives you the ability to manage device encryption from a central location, and this can actually be integrated into SCCM, which we've done for a number of customers, so that this can be managed from within SCCM, which is great. The more you can put in SCCM, you get that single pane of glass for endpoint management. That's another discussion topic that we'd love to have with you. And then you have Advanced Group Policy Management, or AGPM, which is the ability to look at group policy changes and model out how they'll affect your environment. And the DART, which is a toolkit for assessing crash dumps and diagnostic information. LTSB is part of Windows 10 Enterprise, and we also have the normal software assurance benefits, including upgrade rights to future versions and features of Windows, training vouchers and virtualization rights. So if you're doing VDI With Windows, you have VDA or rights to run Windows 10 as a virtual machine in addition to running it on the device itself. So there's a lot of benefits to software assurance and having the Enterprise Edition. I think the biggies are, though, things that were there before, which is direct access in particular, and the components of MDOP, a couple of the components of MDOP. So we've covered a lot of material, miraculously still pretty much on time, and I want to, with that, talk for a moment about the Microsoft Solutions Framework, or MSF. So as a close Microsoft partner, QTS follows the Microsoft Solutions Framework on the majority of our Microsoft-related deployments. MSF is a framework or model for deploying technology into an organization. So it's essentially a 5-stage process that we apply to Windows deployment, we apply to SharePoint, we apply to Exchange. Most of the projects we do will apply MSF to, and it's just baked into our methodology. MSF starts with envisioning. What's the vision? What are we trying to accomplish here? How do we measure success? What is the big picture of what this initiative is going to accomplish for the organization? The next stage is planning. Let's put some flesh on those bones. What's the plan? What's the design for how this vision will be implemented? Those first 2 stages are often covered when we engage with customers around Microsoft Planning Services vouchers, where customers have a Microsoft Enterprise Agreement, and as a software assurance benefit, they have planning services vouchers, and we wrap that into our quick design services. So essentially, we've created our own version of the envisioning planning stages that customers can pay for if they have them using planning vouchers. If you don't have them, you can still have us do quick design services for you. It would just be a regular QTS service. So helping you to plan out the optimal way to deploy the technology in your environment. The third stage is developing, or building, as Microsoft refers to in some cases. That's building the solution. It's writing the code, it's integrating the environment, it's testing, it's application compatibility testing. In case of Windows, it's building the image and testing the image, etc. It's getting the solution ready for deployment. That actually maps, when it's done in a pilot or POC context, to our quick start offerings, which are a production pilot proof of concept stand-up of the technology. I like to refer to this specifically around System Center as about 50-60% deployment, 30 to 40% training, because we do these interactively working with our customers in a knowledge transfer capacity, and maybe 5-10% process integration. How's the technology going to apply into your IT organization and be used? How do we drive adoption? So quick starts are a great way to get started with technology if you're looking to self-deploy but get a quick start into the process. The fourth stage is stabilize or test, what I would actually be more specific and say pilot test. With Windows 10, we found 3 is typically the magic number. What we'll do is build the image in the developing stage, test it out in terms of app compatibility, get it as good as we go, and then do a wave of pilot testing, typically anywhere from 8 to 12 users, 5 to 12 users maybe, get their feedback, redo the image if we need to, refine things, refresh those machines if we need to, and then go to another wave of maybe 12 to 15 users, assess those results, refine again, and then roll to a third group of maybe 15 to 25, and at that point we usually find we've got it. At that point, the refinements usually stop or are very limited, and we feel confident that we can deploy to a much larger audience in a highly automated fashion. That essentially it's tested and ready to go. And I'll give an example. There's a large firm in New York we worked with around Windows 7 deployment with SCCM, where we spent about 3 months in the envisioning, planning, developing stage, and about a month in the stabilizing or testing stage, doing 3 pilot groups, rolled out about maybe 70, 80 PCs, but got the environment and the deployment so automated that in the following 3 months, they were able to roll out another 1,500, 1,600 machines worldwide, 3 data centers, over 50 branch offices, without visiting the branches. And it was all zero touch. So we were able to achieve a high level of engineering there for Windows 10. And what was even better is that we got that imaging down to 15 minutes with personalization, with patches, with apps. So nowadays, if the help desk gets a call and they think it's more than 15 minutes to troubleshoot, they just re-image the machine. And this is the holy grail. This is endpoint nirvana. They have improved the user experience and user satisfaction, and they have reduced IT support costs at the same time. So if you do it right, if you follow the framework, you plan it right, you execute against the plan, you test thoroughly with the right people, you can really have success around an initiative that's often feared by IT because it has the potential to be so disruptive. So I think I'm right on time and have not given Alex a lot of time to bring us home with calls to action and next steps, but with that I'm going to turn it back over to Alex. But I think there was a worthwhile story to tell, and let her tell you about how we can help you and what some next steps could be following today's webinar, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Great. Thanks so much, Neil. I hope everybody had some great takeaways from the presentation. I know I sure did. So as far as our calls to action are concerned, they definitely play into the MSF. There are multiple different ways to determine what the best solution for you and for your team and your organization might look like. Engage us in a roadmap or strategy meeting. You can leverage those software assurance benefits if you have an EA or a quick design, or if you have SA training vouchers for Windows 10 and SCCM training. So we are able to cover both sides there. And you could also engage us for a quick start to talk about project deployment, you know, and really come up with a solution that fits your specific environment. A big initiative that we're pushing out right now, because we are growing so rapidly right now, is staying informed. So we do have a couple of upcoming seminars and webinars. We have one on disaster recovery tomorrow in New York City. Registration is still open. You can email me if you'd like to attend. I can probably sneak you in. And we have a couple other ones coming up. With the next one is April 20th. That's going to be co-sponsored and presented by Nintex about SharePoint and Nintex workflows. So that's definitely something we're very excited about, as well as our Office 365 seminars. Those are going to be in 2 locations, one in April and one in May. We also post all of our updates as far as recordings from our seminars and webinars on our YouTube channel, as well as links on our Twitter and our YouTube page. Feel free to contact me if you're having trouble accessing those, but they will be on the follow-up email. And last but not least, I think Neil mentioned it as well, join us for QuikInVision 2016. It's our 9th annual customer conference. With a huge emphasis on technology, obviously because we're such a strong Microsoft partner. It's within the Microsoft stack. We've released our theme, but I'm keeping it super secret for right now. And it's due September 13th, 2016 in New York City. So stay tuned for more details there. I'm going to stop the recording now, and we're going to open up the floor for questions.